Hey folks, Zach Osterman, Insider Indianapolis Star. Forgive me. I promise we won't normally do this, but we're going to do a second Friday video here. We did the Friday rundown. Just been trying to kind of do that as a way of recapping the week, looking to the weekend if there's anything relevant there. We talked about this in the Friday rundown, but it's gotten a lot of traction just because we were able to get a hold of the memorandum of understanding that Indiana signed with Rod Carey as its new offensive coordinator Friday morning or Friday right around lunchtime. And wrote a story about that, talked about it some in the Friday rundown, but it's gotten a lot of traction on Twitter. And so I just kind of wanted to circle back on that specifically. And I think in particular, there's been sort of a feeling of, number one, why is Indiana paying Rod Carey $815,000 a year? That is the highest sort of guaranteed salary an IU coordinator has ever received. The dogs are no longer in the room, by the way. They will not interrupt the way they did last time. And number two, essentially, why has he been handed a contract through December 31st, 2025? I think the salary in particular has people's backs up. And I think there's a few things that I would say about this. First of all, that number is high relative to what Indiana has paid coordinators in the past. I would argue it's not terribly high compared to Rod Carey's resume. Maybe you can make some arguments around his offense is never really clicking during his years as head coach at Temple. But what his offenses did at Northern Illinois statistically was very, very good. And, if you were hiring someone who had been kind of the offensive coordinator, head coach, but certainly with an offensive focus, of those Northern Illinois teams to be your offensive coordinator, they would command a pretty substantial dollar figure. And I don't think it's, Indiana was paying Walt Bell, I think about $700,000. I should have looked it up before this video started, forgive me, but I'm confident it was $700,000 in annual guaranteed compensation. That's pre-bonuses. This isn't a huge step up from that, relatively speaking, and it's not, when you look at Bell's resume and when you look at Rod Carey's resume, it's not a huge departure from the idea that you're paying that person something around what the market would probably value them at. Number two, I think there's the timeline of all this. And there's 2 points I would make about that. The first one is, there's always, fan bases are always curious. And I would argue sometimes perhaps, generously optimistic. And this is any fan base. This isn't just Indiana. This is just, I think, a phenomenon that I see in college football in general. When a coordinator position opens up, there's just sort of this hope or this belief that essentially there is a perfect coordinator out there just sort of waiting for Indiana. In this case, let's use Indiana as the example to call. Coordinator hires succeed and fail for a whole host of reasons. Some struggle early and then come on later. When you think about Indiana and Nick Sheridan's time at Indiana, he had a perfectly good first season at Indiana, that the COVID season in 2020, not just the results Indiana had, but navigating the challenges of that season and, how strange preparation was week to week and, losing big swaths of guys because of positive testing and all those different kinds of things. And Indiana's offense had some really memorable days that season, some really good performances that season in 2020. And you wouldn't have said Nick Sheridan was a bad, hire, or elevating him when Kalen DeBoer left was a bad decision after the 2020 season. And then, of course, 2021 happens and Indiana feels compelled to make the change. So my point is, that these things aren't binary. Coordinator hires are always going to be some good, some bad. And the challenge is essentially trying to find a way to make the good obviously outweigh the bad. In bringing Rod Carey in now, this is not me speculating at all beyond what I think everyone can recognize, which is Tom Allen's contract is very coach-friendly in terms of its buyout through the end of next season, the end of the 2024 season. If we're still talking about Indiana football struggling at the end of next season, then I think everyone, including Tom Allen, would understand, how the math would add up at that point. If you understand what I'm saying, I think everyone, including Tom Allen, would understand, if things haven't really been turned around by December 2024, some tough decisions will probably have to be taken. If Tom Allen waits until the winter, goes into the sort of, I guess you call it coordinator market, tries to do the best he can, he's bringing in somebody who basically will get the end of January through to Thanksgiving to fix the offense. That'll be it. And he's getting someone who may, depending upon the results of this season, be taking the job under the pressure of saying, I've got to turn this offense around, or we all may be in some trouble at the end of the 2024 season. That is obviously not a position that a lot of coordinators would want to be in, and that would probably pare down your candidate pool, noticeably, if not substantially. You bring in Rod Carey, though. You give Rod Carey now well over a year in this offense. You give him the rest of this season essentially to, kind of wade into the group, start putting his stamp on some things. Obviously, he said, I can't change a lot structurally midstream. That's understandable. You can't tear the airplane apart midair and then rebuild again midair. But it at least gives Rod Carey time to really kind of maybe, get elbows deep in the good and the bad of where Indiana is offensively. And so you get somebody who, if he can turn the offense around and Indiana can turn its season around and have the kind of season Tom Allen's hoping for this year, fantastic. And if not, if things are still, trending in a more struggling direction toward the end of this season, at least your offensive coordinator is in place day one of your offseason heading into 2024 with a working knowledge of what he's got, what he needs, what's going to work, what he needs to fix, where he needs to change things. It just gives the person in that job, in this case Rod Carey, more time to try and just sort of figure out basically how to fix what is ailing Indiana's offense and how to get it fixed, in the space of time that everybody's probably got to feel comfortable with. And again, I want to be careful in my language here because I don't like people who just talk openly about, this date was when it'll end, or this date, or this. There's so much that goes into that. And again, success and failure, coaches will always tell you, it comes down to wins and losses. But there's so much that goes into that is not going to ever be as simple as you hired this coordinator, or you hired that coordinator, or you picked this play in this moment, or that play in that moment. There are always layers to it. But then the last thing I would say is Rod Carey has a background that would have made him an appealing candidate anyway, I think. I don't know if he would have been your most appealing candidate of all, in the whole pool. I can't promise you there wasn't some coordinator out there that Indiana could pull in and if they waited until December or January. I can't promise you there's not some innovative mind that would have been open to talking to Indiana or anything like that. I also, listen, Rod Carey has been around football, but not in the sort of rat race, the daily sort of grind of a head coaching position for a couple years now. There's a very real chance that he has gotten to a place where he can innovate on some things, and he's gotten to a place where maybe he's evolved his thinking on offense, and you're going to see even a different approach than maybe what we would have described as Northern Illinois offenses. I'm not endorsing the move necessarily. I'm not criticizing the move. I'm basically presenting the thought process that I think, a thought process that if it in any way mirrors what Tom Allen was thinking through just the whole sort of step-by-step timeline of deciding to move on and dismiss Walt Bell, deciding to bring in Rod Carey, not as the interim offensive coordinator, but as the full-time offensive coordinator, and then giving him the contract and the structure and the security that he did, I sort of understand. I understand where he can get to this, I guess, is my point. And listen, I understand Indiana fans who are just generally frustrated with the direction of this program. That is not something I'm going to deny anybody right now. And I don't think, frankly, I don't think Tom Allen, if he were sitting here, would deny it either. Having said that, I don't know that some of the furor around Carey's contract in terms of its, all the minute details quite lines up in maybe some of the ways people feel. I can just, like I said, I can put myself in Tom Allen's position and understand the thought process that led to kind of just where Indiana is right now with Rod Carey, and giving Rod Carey, again, real ample opportunity here to dig into what's wrong with Indiana's offense, what's right with Indiana's offense, what needs fixed, what needs strengthened, what needs accentuated, and what needs sort of spun forward, or whatever other term you want to use. I can understand how Indiana got here, and I actually don't necessarily think that it's quite as it's quite as large of a leap as maybe some people are portraying it. So just wanted to kind of add some more thoughts on that, because it's clear. Again, I promise I won't do multiple videos a day most of the time, but it is clear that there were a lot of sort of passionate views on this, and I just kind of wanted to add my 2 cents. So we'll leave it there. Have a great weekend. We will be back next week as we discussed, and we will talk to you soon.